lifelong learners, and productive citizens. Vision statement, education that challenges conventional thinking prepares all students to compete in a global society and inspires our students, parents, staff, and community to answer the question, what if?
Thank you, Director Klein-Jerome. Director Beck, would you please read the guiding principles?
Sure. Guiding principles. Opportunity. We provide abundant opportunities to empower students to reach their full potential academically, creatively, and socially. Collaboration. We foster an environment that allows students, families, and community stakeholders to come together for the betterment of our students' education and future. Transparency. We share relevant and important information with our students, families, and the community to maintain open and productive communication.
Superintendent Schneckhoff, would you please read the goals?
Tonight will be enhanced student learning goal number 1.
All right, thank you. Student board reports. Perfect timing.
We all just got here, so we're pulling it up. So I'll let's get some stuff out real quick. So I want to first off give congratulations to Alexis Peters for being the district runner-up and state qualifier for the for girls bowling. We are waiting on a photo for the event, so we'll try to send that to you as soon as we have it. And then our speech and debate national qualifiers, we have Elliot Griffith, and I hope I said that right, in dramatic interpretation, and Clementine Springsteen in original oratory. And then for our alternates, we have I'm sorry, I'm not going to try to pronounce that. First in alternate in dramatic and interpretation and informative speaking. And then Trinity Merrick, second in alternate in informative speaking and congressional debate. We then have a Valentine's Day themed fundraiser for the vocational welding. I don't have much more info on that, unfortunately, but if anybody wants some Valentine's Day, maybe last-minute gifts, then you have that available. Our 2023 registered software engineer apprentices, we have Voon, I believe it's Nguyen. I apologize, I don't know how to pronounce that, and Logan Gosh. They will be part-time students at, I believe, John Deere. I hope I have that correct. And then lastly, on February 8th, we had a fairly large group of students go to Augustana for a college visit. And then just some two final things. Our Kenya team have returned. Goodbye, me. Our Kenya team has returned from Kenya. As far as I've been told, it was basically a huge success. They got the water tower deployed, and they were able to teach some of the locals how to actually maintain the device in the future. Only some small language barriers. Other than that, it basically went smooth, although I believe a piece of luggage was lost on the way to London, so that is unfortunate. And I believe one person got food poisoning, so but I think they've recovered since. So other than that, just one last kind of self-serving thing is my birthday's tomorrow, so thank you guys.
On the north side, North Science Bowl team represented Davenport very well, placing top 12 at the Iowa Regional High School Science Bowl, hosted by Ames Lab at Iowa State University. Performance aside, we had an amazing time, and our team has formed a very close bond. I would like to offer a special thanks to North's Mrs. Laura McCreary. She made this possible for us. North's Green Team held a showing of the film Youth Unstoppable on February 5th as a part of River Action's environmental film series. We are the only high school involved in that film series. Very huge achievement for us. The event went really well, and our senior Green Team members were subsequently connected to a scholarship opportunity offered by River Action. So great things all around.
Speaking of Northside, our show choir season just started up 3 weeks ago. North hosted their annual Big Dance Show Choir Invitational, where we hosted 17 schools, junior prep and varsity groups, and 2 of our feeder middle schools, which was really great for us. Other than that, last week we competed at Bettendorf, placed 4th in both daytimes and finals for our varsity group, and our junior varsity group made 4th place. And then this past weekend, on Saturday, we went to Van Horn to compete at Benton's Invitational, and we placed 4th in both daytimes and finals again, I believe. So that was really great for us. We were glad to keep our place. And then this upcoming Thursday, pending the snowstorm, our orchestra will be hosting their 3rd term concert featuring a performance from our chamber choir.
Thank you, student board members. We always appreciate your insight. If you'll notice, we did move you all up in the agenda, so that way if you have to get out of here, don't feel like you got to stay. We appreciate you all coming.
I would like to just say we really appreciate that, and thank you very much for working with us with that.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Again, thank you all very much for coming and stuff. We appreciate it. We were a little nervous when no one was sitting over there when we were getting ready to start. So
The elevator was broken and all of the stairs were locked.
good point. And happy early birthday, Jackson. All right, we will now hold a public hearing on the proposal to continue using the 1,080 hour model for the 2023-24 school year. This proposal was published in the Quad City Times on January 27, 2023. Anyone wishing to speak on this item, please step forward to the microphone. State your name and address for the record. There's no one here, so seeing and hearing none, I now declare the public hearing closed. Is there any further board discussion on this matter? May I have a motion?
Mr. President,
Director Hayes.
I move that the board accept the proposal to continue with the 180 or 1,080 hours for school year 23-24.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll now do a roll call vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. We will now hold a public hearing on the proposed start date for the 2023-24 school year of Wednesday, August 23rd, 2023. This proposal was published in the Quad City Times on January 27th, 2023. Anyone wishing to speak on this item, please step forward to the microphone. State your name and address for the record. Seeing and hearing none, I now declare the public hearing closed. Is there any further board discussion on this matter? Seeing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. President, I
Director.
move that the board approve the start date of August 23rd, 2023 for the 2023-24 school year.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll do a roll call vote on this one as well. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. We don't have any recognitions tonight or presentations. Board reports. Are there any board reports? Director Hayes.
The board would like to express our deepest sympathy to the Roberts family in the passing of Miss Betty Roberts. She was here just a few weeks ago when we dedicated the wrestling room at Central, and she passed a couple weeks ago.
Thank you, Director Hayes. Director Poston?
On February 1st, I was able to make a visit to Truman Elementary to observe on the new math curriculum. I'd like to thank Principal Willis for spending time with me. Also, Mrs. Ross from 4th grade, Mrs. Otera Utman Brent from 5th grade, and Mrs. Simpson in 2nd grade. And then on February 7th, in the afternoon, I was able to spend some time observing in 4 classrooms. Again, I'd like to thank Mr. Schneiden for setting that up for me. Mrs. Ost in 2nd grade, Mrs. Pennock in kindergarten, Mrs. Lewison in 1st grade, and Mrs. Shootman in 5th grade. On February 10th, I was able to visit Fillmore, again to observe the new math curriculum. I want to thank Principal Bowman for her time, and then Mrs. Kimmel for you spending all the time that you did, taking me to the different classrooms. I appreciate it. Mrs. Snar in 5th grade, Mrs. Spear in 3rd grade, Mrs. Olderog in 6th grade, and Mrs. Macius in 2nd grade. And then on February 10th, I was able to go to McKinley. I want to thank Principal Vincent for spending time with me. Observed Mrs. Piper, reading interventionist, working with kids from 3 different kindergarten classes, and then also observing reading in 5th grade. And just one last thing, I'd like to congratulate the West High girls basketball team for getting their first win of the season, and congratulations to Coach Cruzy. This is a group of gals that haven't given up all season, and I just give them a lot of credit, and Coach Cruzy a lot of credit for hanging in there.
Thank you. Director Beck, did you have a report? Go ahead.
President Gosa and I were both selected by the IASB to be student success ambassadors. And that involved a 2-day training on how to get messaging across to legislators, the media, and really anyone who needs to hear the great news about public schools. And so we spent all day on Friday, January. Do you remember the numbers? I forgot. It's the last weekend of January. We spent all day Friday and half the day Saturday with a consulting group called Wickstead that has done this before. And we got intensive training in practicing delivering messages to legislators, practicing sound bites for camera, and also basically designing how best to write a message that is meaningful, short, to the point, and that people will hear. And when I say messaging, I'm talking specifically about things that the IASB is supporting. This is part of their program, but also things that we as school board members think that the community needs to know about. So it was a really worthwhile training, and I believe they determined that we would be appointed for a 2-year term. And so this is an ongoing project. We're the first group to do this. We were with board members from all over the state, and we went to West Des Moines for the training. And so over the next 2 years, we will be reporting back occasionally on our activities. The first big activity is tomorrow's Day on the Hill. IASB has a day of meetings with legislators. I will not be able to go because of my job, but I'm sure President Gosa will have some reports for us later.
Thank you. Are there any other board reports? All right. We'll move on to communications, open forum. There is like absolutely no one in the audience except Jackson's dad.
I actually
Do
have
we
no
have
idea
any
who he is.
virtual
He's just some
ones?
random guy that brought me here.
No virtual either? Okay. No open forum tonight. May I have a motion on the consent agenda?
Mr. President,
Director Beck.
I move the board approve the consent agenda as written.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll do a roll call vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Superintendent report.
None at this time.
Committee reports. This is like cruising along way too fast here. Do you have an update on the data wall?
None at this time.
Okay. Finance committee, you guys meet next week? Oh,
No, we met 2 weeks ago and had discussion on negotiations and that. But I think our next meeting is going to be, we don't know. Okay.
thank you. Legislative advocacy, we'll be doing the Day on the Hill tomorrow. I think we're leaving at 6 a.m. And then what was the date that we got for the IJAG Day on the Hill? What was that? It was March.
It's 2 dates, and I don't know if our high schools have selected.
John, is that firmed up yet? We had looked at March 7th.
Never mind. I retract that.
It's either March 7th or March 9th.
Okay. LZAC, is there an update on LZAC?
Our next meeting is next Tuesday, the 18th? No, 21st.
It's the, yeah.
Yeah, it's next week.
And we're going to be meeting monthly-ish for the rest of the academic year.
Okay. Jackson, did you have your hand up?
So I just want to confirm so it's not tomorrow, the Day on the Hill, it's in March, or is that something else?
No. Day on the Hill for us is tomorrow.
Okay.
That's
But that's
what
for
it
you
is.
guys only.
Yep.
Not
Yep.
for, that's not something I can go to, or
What's that?
that's not something I can go to? I mean, it's probably too late now, but I was just wondering if there's
Okay.
something in the future then that I could tag along
You
with.
have school, don't you?
Tomorrow is, this is a great question, Jackson, but tomorrow is for board members and through IASB. The Day on the Hill, now that would be another,
Right. We're
Potential.
working on doing it. Yes.
Okay. Just making sure you have my dates right. Thank you.
No problem. Policy committee?
Just one thing, policy number 413.01 is going to be pulled tonight. It listed as resignation, but if you read it, it got retirement in there, so that policy will be put on a future agenda. 413.01.
Long-range facilities planning, Director Potts not here tonight, so basically we just kind of met and went over the plan going forward on the different things. Nothing really yet to report out on. I think we'll be having a presentation on the next phase for phase one and then yeah. All right, we'll move on to items requiring action. May I have a motion on subject 11.01, approval of the FY 2022 audit?
Mr. President,
Director Poston.
move the board approve the fiscal year 2022 audit as presented.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote, or I'll do a roll call vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. All right. May I have a motion on subject 11.02, math resource adoption?
Mr. President,
Director Beck.
I move the board approve the HMH into math for the 8-year contract of $3,999,770.09.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Klein Jerome. Is there any discussion? I will turn it over to the superintendent. They got a presentation. Yes.
Thank you for the opportunity. Some of the questions that were asked in previous meetings, the team that's leading the field study at this point is with us today. They've been working tirelessly. I want to thank anybody that's involved in that field study because they have really helped set this project forward in a positive light, because we now know what's going to be necessary for next year to implement. This has been a very long process, and I'm very proud of the process that has been put in place for curriculum adoption. It's going to set us up for success in the future. And I just want to remind the board that we have gone through the selection process of materials, and that where we are right now is we are in our field test site. So with us today, if you guys wouldn't mind introducing yourself, and Diane, we'll start over here on the left with you, and then we'll get right into our presentation, and I'll turn it over to our team. You've worked very hard at putting this presentation for us together, because one of the big asks was, what's the data look like? Show me the data. And that's a big focus area of tonight's presentation. And we're going to see some really positive things with us tonight too. So let's do some introductions and then we'll get rolling. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Diane Campbell, and I'm the District Support Administrator with Mississippi Bend Area Education Agency, and also supported the interim position for Learning and Results early in the school year.
Bonnie AC, Program Director of Curriculum.
Mike Wells, Pre-K 12 Math Curriculum Specialist.
Cindy Lewis. I am currently serving as the Interim Director of Learning and Results. Actually, Diane, I'm not letting her get too far, and these friends over here call us Diane D. But our job is to support the fine people that work here in the administration building, but in service of students and teachers in the building. So it's my privilege to be here.
Okay, I'm going to kick us off. So, oh yeah, would you open the presentation for us? Thanks. And Brenda, would you like us to click through? Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Tim. Shout out. So we are excited to be here, and thanks for welcoming us back. Especially, we're excited to share the new HMH middle of the year growth measure assessment data with you, comparing that to our beginning of the year growth measure assessment. We're also going to be highlighting the growth that the students made between those testing windows. We'll be providing some updates on our field test implementation, including some next steps in our implementation plan as we move forward. Based on teacher feedback. And then at the end of the presentation, we're happy to answer any questions that you may have. So we wanted to really focus on 3 of those IASB questions that we know you guys are always asking and wondering about. So in our presentation today with number 2, so what progress are we making? Specifically, we're going to share that data and talk about some of those wins that we've had so far with that growth measure assessment. On number 3, what are some of those concerns? What are some of those hurdles that we've encountered along the way? Knowing that with the field test, we definitely expected to have a few road bumps that we've encountered, and just being really purposeful about solving those along the way and what actions it's going to take to help us have a successful implementation next year. And then number 5, what are those next steps? What does that action plan look like based on teacher feedback as we move forward? And so within our outcomes for today, it's embedded within our continuous improvement process. You can see that we're going to be talking a little bit about our current state, where we are right now with that field test with HMH. That would be step 1. We're also going to be looking at those strengths and barriers as we go through what's going well, what are those hiccups and road bumps. That's step 2. We're going to be updating you on the plan, the things we've already done and the things we're going to continue to work on as step 3. And then finally, we're going to get to hear some data where we're assessing that impact in step 5. So this slide should look familiar from when we presented to the board back in November, but important just to kind of review that process within our curriculum adoption process and the steps. So you know that during phase 1 and 2, that was when our team came together. That team consisted of administrators, teachers, TLCS, curriculum, AEA, and directors. And we use that math evaluation rubric to determine that HMH received the score of strong evidence present in all categories. Those categories, again, included research, quality instruction, evidence of student learning, and accessibility and responsiveness to all student needs. That is how we determined that the best choice for DCSD was the HMH suite for our pre-K-8 math curriculum. With that choice, it was determined that we would run that field test this year for the 22-23 school year. Again, remembering that that field test is the choice to implement a single product, which allows us to really work out some of those kinks along the way so that we have a very successful full-scale implementation the following year. So towards the end of the presentation today, we're going to share with you some of the feedback we've gotten from teachers along the way, where they're able to share any concerns and road bumps that we've had and talk about what have we addressed and what do we still need to address as we move forward in our action plan. We really just want to celebrate phase 3. This is just a reminder of those buildings that are participating right now in our field test project. And so we want to celebrate the partnerships that we've had with these building leaders and teachers. They've worked so hard to implement this curriculum with fidelity and to provide both HMH and our district leaders with valuable feedback along the way. We're very proud of their efforts and commend them for championing us in this work as we've gone through. And so when we analyze that growth measure, so when we're actually looking at the middle of the year growth measure assessment, that is step 5 of our continuous improvement process, where we want to assess our impact and ask, is our plan working? How's it going? What adjustments need to be made? And so this is just a really important opportunity to assess our plan based on those student achievement data points and make any adjustments as needed. And we'll continue to do that through the rest of the year as we prepare for an end of the year growth measure assessment as well. So before we jump into the data, we just want to make sure that you understand what is the growth measure assessment. And so we just wanted to provide a little bit of background. This is a new diagnostic tool for DCSD that's built right into the HMH suite. So this is an assessment that's administered 3 times a year. It takes a student roughly 40 minutes on average to complete that assessment. It's a computer adaptive assessment that adjusts to the student's proficiency right on the fly. So no 2 assessments are identical and items are closely matched to each student's ability. Student scores are immediately available right inside that HMH Ed platform so teachers can see it right away. That growth measure score feeds into all components of HMH, Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. So based on their score, it helps provide them the direct access to the instruction that they need at each level. At the bottom is just a little snippet of what a teacher would see right within their dashboard, articulating where their class scored in each performance level, as well as a class average. So you can see right there, and we'll go into a little bit more of those reports later.
So now I get to take some time to walk you through the data. It's going to be about a 20-minute conversation because there's a lot of good data pieces in here. And so we're going to talk through majority of the growth measure assessment because it's a lot of data and it's new to us. And then we're also going to kind of make links between some of the data and the assessments we're used to. So ISASP and then the AMATH and those kind of assessments. So here we go. Let's buckle up. So this is going to look into that IASB question number 2, where are we making progress? How do we know? And what wins can we celebrate? So we're going to look to celebrate some wins with you tonight because we've seen a lot of great work between our teachers and our students, and we're super proud of all that work. So We're going to talk about 3 different measures inside of HMH, and the first one we're going to talk about is a scale score. So a scale score just is the idea of a grade level number followed by 1 through 99. And so all of our students, you can see on the bottom left, that's an example. All of our students of the 5th grade would be a 5 something. So this is a fake student, but they would have a scale score of 566 indicating where they are inside of the grade level. This is a great resource when you start thinking about looking at the growth measure assessment, talking about what kind of items they answered correctly, and then also the difficulty of the questions that they were provided since it is an adaptive test. In the bottom right, you can see the bullets there from HMH. These are great resources for teachers on how to use the data. So this one is good for group students for differentiation instruction, identify needs for intervention, inform placement of decisions, and compare performance among same grade students. So this is a picture of all of our students' scores, scale scores throughout the district. On top, you can see the BOY, which is the beginning of the year growth measure. And in the red, there's the middle of the year growth measure. And visually, you can it just jumps out at you. But in the beginning, it was an average of a 39 scale score. And through all the hard work of the students and the teachers, we see a 10-point scale score jump all the way to 49. This is just our field test buildings. Yep. So any growth measure assessment, thank you for clarifying, any growth measure assessment's all only going to be the field test buildings. So we do see a 10-point scale score jump from beginning of year to middle of year in about 4 to 5 months here. When talking with Chris Peterson, the Director of Academic Planning and Analytics from HMH, she said if we were having this conversation at the end of the year, she would be over the moon. So the fact that we've seen 10-point scale score average jump between our students in these quick 4 or 5 months was phenomenal. So she's really excited about that. And we were really celebratory of that because that is a huge jump to see between all of our grade levels K, 8. And I do want to clarify, we are doing pre-K as well, but pre-K is not in this data. That's all manipulative materials. This is just K-8 data. And I also want to point out that 95% of our students inside this data pieces are just receiving the Tier 1 and Tier 2 product, Waggle and Into Math. We do have some students that were tested in the Tier 3 product, and they'll be in here as well, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well, but majority of our students in this data set are just receiving Tier 1 and Tier 2 at this point. Average scale score, so we're going to dig a little bit deeper here, and this is based on each grade level now, so you can see that by grade level, you can see the average scale score change for our students. So just to call out, you can see a really great amount of change in the beginning of the year, so the younger ages, I'll say. We see a little dip there, and then we see another picking it back up at our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, which is phenomenal to see that kind of growth there. So on the left is our beginning of the year scores for average of that grade level, and on the right is our middle of the year, and then the change on the right. And just a theme for this is green is good. So you can see a lot of green there. That's all positive change there. Digging into our next metric, grade level equivalency, this goes a little bit further into detail. It will give a range of a score of a student based on what they're performing inside the growth measure. And that range can range all the way from pre-K 0 all the way to 12.8. This kind of differentiates inside the grade level. So a 5th grader could score something like 3.2. saying that they're in the 3rd grade level. On the flip side of that, they could score a 6.4, showing that they're working at the 6th grade level. So this does show a little bit difference there. There are 5 categories inside of that. We have more than 2 grade levels below, 2 grade levels below, 1 grade level below, on grade level, and then above grade level. And again, if we use those 2 dots on the right, the great informational piece of this is that we can indicate students are ready to learn the current year's grade level content, and also determine if the kids are getting closer or further away from the end of the year expectation. And again, this is a snapshot of our entire district here, of the field test, that is. And real quick, this is only talking about test pairs. And so real quick note about test pairs. The only data that will be in here is if a student took the beginning of the year and the middle of the year. If a student did not take the beginning of the year because they were not here yet, or they left early and did not take the middle of the year, their data won't show up in this data chart. So I just want to take a pause for a moment and celebrate this, because this is exactly the trend we would love to see here. As a generality here, you want to see those reds and oranges getting smaller, which we do, and we want to see the greens and blues getting larger, which we do as well. So it's really exciting to be able to celebrate a Tier 1, Tier 2 product, again, majority of the data here, helping and assisting both sides of this spectrum here, which is really fantastic. So celebrate between beginning of the year and middle of the year, we saw 337 kids that were more than 2 grade levels below, now only down to 263. And on the flip side of that, we had 35 students testing above grade level, and now we have all the way up to 127. So really exciting to see that data here. Again, this is across all of our field test buildings, K-8, and really it's just a tremendous kudos to all of our teachers and all the hard work that they've done here, because this is a phenomenal thing to see here across the district. We're going to spend some time digging in a little bit deeper to each grade level. A quick note about kindergarten and first grade, you notice there is not a red or an orange category. That's because they don't have 2 grade levels below kindergarten and first grade in this case. So you will not see those categories in here. Same thing for second grade. You don't see that more than two grade levels below here. But the same is still here. The same trend is still here. You can see those greens are getting larger. The blues are getting larger. When you get over to the right in second and third grade, we see those oranges and reds getting smaller. Just to point out a couple celebrations here and a couple wins here. In first grade, you see that 33 for green, jumping all the way to 64 in about 4 months. In second grade, you see that 5 to 20 all the way in our above grade level students, And then when we start seeing that more than 2 grade levels below in third grade, we see that slimming down from 37 all the way to 22. So just a really big win here inside of our data sets for our grade levels. Again, same idea here. So again, the trends we're looking for is a red and orange get smaller, blue and green get larger. And again, we do see that as a whole. Again, some celebrations here. Fourth grade, 44 in the beginning of the year, all the way down to 27. Again, tier 1 and 2 product only. So there's no tier 3 product involved in that one. Looking at our fifth grade, we see from 7 above average students all the way to 17. And then in sixth grade, again, we see that green grow tremendously from 25 all the way to 44. So getting those kids to on grade level, according to the grade level equivalency, is just a phenomenal feat here. And then our last 2 grade levels, 7th and 8th grade, same trends are applying here. Reds and oranges getting smaller, blues and greens getting larger. Shout out and a win for that 7th grade, 30 to 42. And then inside of 8th grade, our yellows getting from 19 to 26. So again, that's less than 1 grade level below. So that means that kids are right there at the space that they might need to be and getting closer to on grade level assessment values here for the grade level equivalency. We're going to look at the same metric here, but now we're going to focus on the difference in the schools. And so here are our K-6 buildings implementing in the field test, Eisenhower, Fillmore, and Truman. And again, the beautiful thing about this picture here is that this is working at all 3 of those buildings. We see the exact same trends. The orange and reds are getting smaller, the blues and greens are getting bigger, and we're seeing great success across all 3 of our elementary field test buildings. So I can't say this enough, and I'm going to say it again over and over again, but this is a testament to all of our teachers' hard work, all of our students' hard work, and these buildings' hard work. They're taking on a tremendous task here, and we're seeing great results based on their efforts here. So we can't be more excited about seeing these graphics here, because these are exactly where the trends we want to see going forward in a short 4 to 5 months here. Here's a look at our field test buildings for the junior high. So we have SMART on the left and Walcott on the right. And again, looking at those trends, we're seeing the same kind of trends. Tier 1 and Tier 2 products only, and not seeing any Tier 3 products involved in this piece yet. We're going to switch gears just a tad here. We're still going to look at grade level equivalency, but now we're looking at a metric based on how much students have grown within the year or within the 4 to 5 months between tests. And so if you look at all those gray boxes on top, that number of students indicates by grade level how many made a full year's growth jump in or more inside the grade level equivalency already. I did the math already, so it's 399 students have already made 1 full year growth or more between beginning of the year and middle of the year. So we really are very excited to see that. These kids are latching on to the information right away, and we're really seeing them being pushed and moved in the right direction to get a little bit closer to grade level in this case, or to go beyond grade level. So it's really exciting to see that data. The orange would be indicating at least half grade level, and then the blue would be saying a little bit less than half grade level equivalency jump between now and the middle of the year. And I do want to linger on this one just a little bit more because it paints this beautiful picture of where our district was in the beginning of the year and where we are now. When we first presented to you, we did get to see this nice bell curve at the top, which we see that red portion up there, which consists of 28% of our students that were tested. And then on the far right, we see 35 students, which are 2% of our students that are tested that are above average. When we look down to the middle of the year now, we can see in that short amount of time, 4 to 5 months, we go from 470 students that were more than 2 grade levels below, all the way down to 325. And on the other side of things, we went from 35 students that were above grade level all the way up to 128 students that are above grade level in these 4 to 5 months. Again, we do have some tier 3 data inside of this. This is 95% of our students inside this data set are just using the tier 1 product and the tier 2 product inside these field test buildings. I love looking at this picture on the bottom simply because when we start thinking about that yellow as well, which is less than 1 grade level below, we're talking right now at the middle of the year. So we're still talking about kids that are having great opportunities to get to that end of year expectation, which is over half of our bell curve in this picture, which is just extremely exciting. So again, red and orange is going to the left, which we love to see. Green and red are growing and getting larger, which we love to see. And this is just a testament to our teachers. They're doing a fantastic job. This is the curriculum that's working for those teachers, for those students, and we're really excited to see that. The last metric we're going to talk about is a performance level. This does kind of relate to our scale score. So you can see inside of these 5 categories of above level, on level, approaching, below level, and far below, you can see that the ranges in there. And so those would be the scale scores that go inside of those ranges. And I do want to point out that those ranges are kind of big, depending on the grade level there, or the performance level. And so we'll see some information about what kind of movement we've seen between the performance levels. And again, on the right here, on those dots, these are great for teachers to see that, get an at a glance view of students' achievement on the grade level content. And it's also, I want to point out one thing about here, this is about the domains. So we're going to see a report here in a second about how we can dissect the student now. Instead of just saying a number, we can look at the actual domains inside of math and how that student is doing. So let's transition right into that. This is an example of what a teacher would see inside of HMH after giving the growth measure assessment. This is a student, we'll call a student AC. And this shows exactly where the student is compared to the grade level, or the class, excuse me, and then also per domain on what the student was tested. So on the top level, you can see that the teacher has 7 kids that are below level, 7 kids that are approaching, and 4 kids that are on level. And then you can see the dot kind of sneaking out there, the AC. That's exactly where AC falls inside of their peers. And then one step below that, under the domain performances, you can see based on every single domain that they were tested in, this is where they're at. So they're at the on level for your numbers, they're at the far below for your operations in algebra, and so on and so forth. So this gives a great opportunity for teachers to conference with students, discuss some strengths and weaknesses, and talk about next steps for the students and how they can continue to grow inside of math and see the different domains inside of math, which is a phenomenal thing for us to be able to use. I'm going to give you that hint again. This is green is good here. So this is our performance level data. This is not test data, so I just want to point that out. These are all of our single tests that were taken. So a kid could have left or a kid could have came in. And based on these tests here, on the far right, you can see on the top 2 categories of far below or below, we saw a decrease in percentage of students of 6% from far below and 8% in below level, meaning kids are leaving those categories inside of 4 to 5 months and going to different categories, which is fantastic. We're seeing those get smaller, like we saw on the bell curve. On the same side, on the other side of this, on the on level and above level, we're seeing positive trends there, which is, again, a positive here. We have 11% growth on our on level, and we have a 6% growth on our above level. And I do want to take some time to explain this one again. This is a test paired situation, and on the left here, so if we're looking at the screen here, the left are our 5 categories, which would have been what the students tested on the beginning of the year. And on the top would be our categories of when they tested in the middle of the year. So if we just target that 229 here, that is 229 students that tested at the below level in the beginning of the year and also tested below level in the middle of the year. So we'll say those are no changes. And again, there is that range inside of below level, so they could have still grown in their scale score, but they just didn't grow enough to get out of their current category in this case. If we transition to the right now, in the color green again, we see our below level, which is 164 students that tested below level in the beginning of the year. And then we see in the middle of the year, they tested enough, or they grew enough to get into the approaching. So we had 164 students that were below level and are now approaching. Same idea. We have 76 students who were below level in the beginning of the year and now have jumped all the way to on level, and even more a feat for our students and our teachers here. We had 6 students who were below level in the beginning of the year, who moved all the way over to the above level category. So if we just summarize this whole thing, we had a 43% change that was a positive change. We had a 10% negative movement, and then we have a 47% no change. And again, doesn't mean the scale score didn't change positive or negatively. They just didn't move enough to get a different category there. So looking at a 43% category change there is just a phenomenal feat for our district right now. We've spent a lot of time talking majority about Tier 1, Tier 2 there, so we want to transition a little bit. We are doing a field test as well with our Tier 3, which is the Math 180. A quick overview, the goal of Math 180 is focused on the specific set of concepts and mathematical practices along the progression to algebra. So everybody knows that algebra is the gatekeeper sometimes in math, and we're seeing that this program is designed to get students to the doorstep of algebra, is the whole goal of this. A little further into the Math 180, it's broken into 6 concepts. You can see on the left, the foundational concepts would be our lower level, grade level concepts. And on the right, we're talking about that transition getting into algebra. This is a program that's built for 512. It needs to stop at 5th grade at this point because it's appropriate for our students that are more than 2 grade levels below. And it does go all the way to 12th grade. We are implementing currently in the field test for 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And then a little note about there are 3 blocks in each thing, 3 topics, and then 5 to 8 lessons. So there's quite a few lessons. Actually, I like how I can just scroll here. So focusing on Jackson Elementary, this is our field test building that's going to implementing for 5th and 6th grade. We can see that the beginning of the year data over here on the left. And just to kind of paint the picture here, Jackson may have tested majority of their 5th and 6th grade students, but aren't intervening on Tier 3 with all of their students. Just there isn't enough time in the day to intervene with all those kids, and it wouldn't be appropriate to intervene with all those students as well. So we do see that the data set was 28 students for the beginning of the year that were more than 2 grade levels below. At the middle of the year students, scores went all the way down to 19 students that are more than 2 grade levels below. So of the test sets, and again, these are test pairs, you can see there are 68 in each one. We had a 13% drop in the more than 2 grade levels below, and we also see growth inside of the on grade level and above grade level as well. Transitioning into Williams. Williams is field testing at the 7th and 8th grade program. We can see that in our 7th and 8th grade, we're seeing some tremendous results here. So again, we have our beginning of year data. And again, Williams chose to identify the students to test and then continue to work with those students and a substitute of those students, and then continue to test the same students as well. So again, there were 69 students in this case that tested. 53 of them in the beginning of the year tested more than 2 grade levels below. And at the middle of the year, we've seen the progression go all the way down to 24, which is a phenomenal feat just to see within about 4 to 5 months again. So we're seeing tremendous results. Again, a lot to attribute to the teachers' hard work and the students' hard work inside this program, but we're seeing the results, and we couldn't be more excited to celebrate with them when we get to talk about this data with you guys and with them. One step further in the Math 180, we can break it down a little bit further. We were able to categorize it based on the number of topics that students were engaging in. So on the left, we see levels. Level 0-1 just means they've completed 0 to 1 topics. There were 54 students in Davenport that did that, and we saw an average grade level equivalency of a 0.59. If you jump that up to 2 to 5 topics, we see that we had 40 students that did that. We can see the grade level equivalency jump all the way to 0.78 already. And then if we get to those overachieving kids right now, they've already got 6 to 11 topics done, which there are 9 of them right now. We see that their grade level equivalency has jumped 1.3 points already this year. So we're seeing that the more we can put in implementation of the Math 180 and encouraging students to get into those topics, the more grade level equivalency increase we're seeing throughout the time. And that was all the growth measure data. We're going to transition a little bit into some more data sets that we're used to. So ISASP and AMAT data here in a second. The first one doesn't have a lot of data yet because ISASP hasn't been given yet, but the big idea here is that on the top here, you can see these 2 charts. These are the domains that HMH has put into their growth measure assessments. And then on the right is just an example of the grade 4 mathematical blueprint from ISASP. And we notice that these domains are the exact same thing. Both ISASP and HMH all align to the Common Core state standards, which is really important to think about the seamlessness between this assessment and the assessments we're going to see later on along the way. We do have AMAT data, so we can talk a little bit about that. So we were able to get some data back for this school year to kind of dissect this chart real quick. The top group here is our non-field test averages. The middle one is our field test averages. And then the bottom is the district averages. We're going to reference the non-field test versus the field test the most, simply because those are the two subsets that don't include each other. And then again, green just means that in this case, if a non-field test data is higher than the field test data. Oh, sorry, that was backwards. I'm sorry. If the field test data is higher than the non-field test data, thank you very much. So on the left here, we see our average scale score, or our average AMAT score for our grade level. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We can see that the field test buildings had in 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th tested on average higher than the non-field test buildings. Same thing is true in the winter data. 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th also tested on average higher than our non-field test buildings. And then if you transition to the difference or the change here, we get to include 2nd grade in this conversation. They grew more than the non-field test buildings, 3rd and 4th and 5th also grew more. And then 6th grade, we would argue, is really close to growing about the same amount there, 1.4 versus the 1.5. So this is almost about as good as it gets for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, because we see they're testing higher at both testing windows and also growing more. So it's really exciting to see that this growth measure data we saw inside of that we were just looking at is translating over into AMAT data in this case. It happens.
Hang on. When you ask your question, you got to turn your microphone on so everybody can hear you.
Sorry to interrupt. And just to clarify, when did the fall AMAT test happen, so that I just have an idea of whether they'd been doing the field test before they took that or not?
So both tests went. So I don't have the exact date. I know it's usually early September or late August for those assessments.
So it's pretty close to the beginning of the year.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. So theoretically, the field test students would not have had a significant amount of time with HMH than the non-field test students for that fall score, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. And then just to clarify as well, the growth measures assessment is given very closely to when the AMAT is, so they're very close in the dates. Transitioning to the 7th and 8th grade, same key here. So we do have our non-field test average on the top, we have our field test average in the middle, and then we have our district average. And so you can see the green means whenever our field test tested higher than the non-field test. So again, 7th and 8th grade for both windows, students on average were testing higher than the non-field test average. And then on the right side, we do see the changes, which are not the same. And we do see a little bit of a dip here in 8th grade based on the average scores.
And so we want to transition to that next part, the last part of our presentation, which is really about teacher feedback and our action planning. And so this is really in alignment with question number 5, what are our next steps? And so that question falls directly within our CSIP plan. With number 2, we're going to talk to you about a lot of the strengths and barriers that we've encountered so far in the field test and any updates to the plan that we've made. So one of the first things we did was talk with teachers about what are those attributes within a curriculum resource that they feel are most important. So here you can see they kind of rank ordered their top 7 we included, and just exciting to show that all of these are in alignment with our current HMH product. So what teachers feel are important are right within the curriculum we're adopting. And so part of that teacher feedback, we're just going to kind of take it through what were some of those hurdles and challenges and concerns that we've heard, and let's talk about each one of them, right? So teacher survey says there were technology issues with Waggle. Yes. So we want to own this, we've heard, right? There have definitely been some technology challenges within our district, and those have definitely impacted Waggle and the function of Waggle, right, to be able to function as it was intended. The field test allowed us that opportunity to, discover a couple things, right? We've been able to dive in and uncover that there was a need to update and ensure student Chromebooks supported Waggle use. We were able to uncover the need to reinforce student Chromebook hygiene and keep them up to date. We've had great collaboration with LIS and TLCS to ensure that these things happen immediately within our classrooms with our teachers. And the important thing about that Chromebook hygiene is not only is this going to help Waggle run as intended, it's going to help support all of our online products. So it's a win-win for all of the online products that we have within Davenport. That partnership with Waggle has been amazing. Our teachers and students have directly been able to provide feedback to Waggle, where they've, in a couple instances, even made new iterations to their product to enhance them even more. Survey also says that there's an increased level of rigor. Yes, absolutely. Unfortunately, rigor is what's been missing in our previous core curriculum. And what we saw from our data today, there was a snippet there just as a reminder, is that our kids can do it. They can meet that level of rigor required to provide our students the standard they need to be successful, productive citizens. And so we couldn't be more excited about that. Now, knowing that, we also know there's a rigor jump, and we're going to plan for that. So we're going to make sure that teachers have those HMH materials in their hands before summer. We're working diligently with our TLCS innovators and buildings and teachers to get that feedback from them to make those needed adjustments to our scope and sequence. So we're going to know right away where's a unit that they need more time, where's a module that they're going to need additional resource to help fill those rigor gaps that they're going to have for a little bit until we get them caught up to where they need to be. Some additional rigor concerns I just want to talk about too are we've heard that there's a lot of reading within the HMH product, and that's exciting. Like, we hear it, and yes, it's exciting. This is going to provide those additional opportunities for students to read in the content area, which, as we know, is very important. They have a built-in scaffold I'm going to talk more about later, that to support them with that level of reading is a strategy called the 3-read strategy. In addition, students are asked to read in math on the ISASP, so this is going to be a great opportunity to help to prepare them for success with our state assessment as well. And so again, that rigor challenge, this is the piece that I think we have to give the biggest kudos to our teachers, because they have really met that challenge and dove in and just trusted the system and the process, and that's why the data shows what it does. Teacher survey also said we need to reevaluate how we gave that initial professional development. And so, that initial training was a little fast and furious. And so we want to make sure that we act on that feedback. And right away, we're going to make sure that that initial training is going to be tailored just to the Tier 1 core right away in August. So that PD calendar for 23-24 is amazing, allowing more time at the beginning of the year for our teachers to get that Tier 1 training, dive into the resources, and be ready to teach when kids arrive on day 1 is really important. They'll have that built-in time for collaboration during their CTTs. And I think the most exciting part for me with this HMH rollout is there's a 3-year PD plan built into what we're purchasing. HMH is aligning each building with their own trainer. So besides their TLCS innovator that they're going to have in their buildings to support this every day, and the continued collaboration with our department and Mr. Wells here, they're going to have their own HMH trainer that will help to provide that ongoing training and support as needed with this curriculum for 3 years. Teacher survey said there's a lot of materials and resources. Yes, we finally have a complete MTSS curriculum for Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. This is that one-stop shop, no more piecemealing, and having to supplement those resources. And we know this is going to take time, right? And so we're being very intentional to build this into our plan. Again, being systematic of let's chunk Tier 1. As they get comfortable with that, build in those Tier 2 and Tier 3 trainings as we go. We're going to prioritize that initial professional development with those essential components of that core lesson. And then we'll use those continuous PDs throughout the year to give them that ongoing training of those additional resources that are all within that HMH suite. Survey also says there's a little bit of a change in pedagogy here with how we teach math. And so we're very lucky when we look at the HMH curriculum. It's designed just truly by an all-star team with the best mathematical practices built into the curriculum. And so knowing that, we also know we have to prepare our teachers for how to teach math differently. And so what's that going to look like? And so helping them get that training and understanding that this program is built around student discourse, students discussing and collaborating with each other about math. It also productive struggle is okay. It's okay to grapple in the I don't know. We don't have to give them the answer right away. Those built-in strategies I talked about earlier, that 3-read strategy, how do we help scaffold that support when there is a lot of reading? This is a student-centered program that's really going to help students take a more active role in their learning in the curriculum. And one of the last themes within the teacher survey is time. We've heard this a lot from our junior high teachers specifically, that there's not enough time to teach the core curriculum. And we honor that, we recognize that. And, what I'm so proud of is that, we discovered there's an infrastructure problem within the junior high level, that there wasn't enough time or a consistent MTSS block. And the action that's already been taken, our junior high principals and our leadership has really committed to developing that middle school model that will prioritize the time and opportunity for that core curriculum so we can do it. We have the time to do it. So I think that's really exciting that we're prioritizing that.
And last but not least, we wanted to make sure we get a little bit of voice from our end users, our students. So we were able to talk to our students about some of the quotes that get in here, and I just want to give them to you real quick. So the students say, I like that if you get 3 questions right or more, you get gems. That's from a 3rd grader. The student also said, I don't like how if you miss questions, you lose your streak for gems. I'm losing my gems. That's a 5th grader. So this inside of Waggle, it's intrinsically motivated to provide gems based on the streak of questions. And so you can see that kids get very motivated by getting those gems there. A 2nd grader said, I like the videos after you do your work so you can feel the achievement for doing your work. And they are interesting videos on how people can make things. And then a 4th grader said, we would rather have an animation of videos for our hints to help me. And I really wanted to put that one in here because I think that's really a testament to the kind of communication we've been giving Waggle. And Waggle's really listening to what we're saying to them. So we would be able to provide this kind of feedback here from an end user to Waggle to see what that could really go for our next iteration of Waggle. Another 4th grader said, one thing I don't like is that sometimes there's a cartoon and people get jealous of that part because it's easier, but you can't get gems. And so I really like that one simply because it articulates the fact that when we're inside that classroom, kids are working on different materials on that Waggle simply because it is diagnostic. It is taking the students and meeting where they're at to push them to where they need to be. So inside the system, you're going to see a bunch of different things at the same time, which is really exciting. And lastly, the 1st grader said, I like watching the videos to help me solve my problems. So I think it's really exciting to see these students being able to, articulate what they do and they do not like about Waggle, and also using that to guide them on the next steps of where that's going. So again, the end users are really what we're here for, and so we wanted to make sure their voice was here as well tonight. So lastly, do you have any questions?
Director Hayes.
You had mentioned that each classroom received an additional trainer. How is that paid?
That's all part of the budget that you approved. The PD plan is built right into that because they know how important that is, that they're committed to that ongoing professional development.
Okay, so no additional cost.
No additional cost.
Thank you. First of all, I did want to thank you for all the work you put into this presentation, and it was good to see the results in such a short amount of time. Looking forward to the see how it works out within the next 2 years, because like the kindergartners are starting now. By 3rd grade, where will they be?
Up there.
Yeah, that was exciting for me. Thank you.
Director Klein-Jerome.
On your average scale scores, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade are lower. Are they because there are gaps that were not done in the current program, and how do we address filling them in? Because if you are, 7 grade levels of missing, how do you find the time to fill in all those missing pieces?
Yeah, we did see a little bit less growth measure or growth in the between those grade levels. One thing to point out that the beginning of the year and middle of the year scores, the scale scores are a little different. They just didn't change as much. But to your point is exactly right. We are talking about a rigor change here. We're talking about a curriculum change that we might have missed some things along the way. And so supporting that piece of it, filling in those gaps. And that's one of the things that we're really working with our teachers right now to talk about where are we seeing students are struggling with inside the curriculum right now? What supports can we give them and how can we get them onboarded along the way? The other piece of that too would be implementing that tier 3 product along in every single building to allow those kids that are testing more than 2 grade levels below the opportunity to use that Math 180.
I did observe some classrooms that were piloting this, and there are technology issues beyond Waggle. I mean, they would have it up on the screen, and it would be a hundreds chart, but the last 2 rows are completely gone. So they said unless they do a snapshot of it and do their own. Is this type of issue being addressed where, they're pulling up a page for the class?
Yeah, we're definitely working with LIS on any kind of issues that are being articulated. There are different options of how to project that. And so there's different ways we've been kind of providing teachers on how to do that, whether it's a PDF or an interactive lesson inside of the system. But all these are the whole point of the field test is to figure out what's not working so that we can get it working the way we want to. And just like Waggle takes all of our information and feedback as well, we do the same thing with the Into Math team to also provide them the feedback to make some changes for the next iteration as well.
And then my last question on. Oh,
I just wanted to piggyback on that. Gary, Ben, myself, 3 tech innovators. Let me see if I can get their names right. Noel Hansen, Ben Reller, and Evan Mosier, and Sean from the AEA. We sat down and we talked today. What is it that we need to do to move forward to make sure? And there were some things. That's why we do field tests, right? And so there's a piece of technology that is being used right now, which is a tablet that allows better control of the screen. And so, the ability to upgrade our projectors, have a higher quality resolution of projection, and the ability for the teacher to be mobile around the classroom are all our goal for the start of next school year. So that work started today, and I'm optimistic that it can be accomplished before the start of next school year, because that's as we tour our buildings, our projection systems all need major work. So we started that today with the hopes of getting it going where our math pilot is first.
yes, I was watching one and the screen was fuzzy and hard to see. And I thought, if you're in the back of the room, I don't know how you're reading this. But and finally, the last slide 42 that says, you're committed to developing a middle school model that prioritizes time and opportunity for core curriculum. And I truly understand that, reading and math is an important thing, but that means something's going away. My concern is in the middle school, what are we taking away to give that time? And what if I'm at that kid who's on the very top? I don't need extra math. I got it. So how do you juggle that and work that out?
That's a very good question. It's something that we started right from the last meeting that this group of people were here. So the curriculum department, John Flynn, and all the middle school principals began to meet immediately. And they've landed on a schedule, and it's a little too early to share the exact details of that schedule. But here's what we believe we've landed on. They can meet the minutes that required for math and language arts. We are going to also be, let's say, for example, you are a student that want to take band, orchestra, and in the future a foreign language, you would be able to accomplish all of those things in the schedule that's being created now. So I am incredibly proud of the work that's been done there. I spent a good amount of time with Mr. Flynn on the phone on Sunday to make sure that I had enough information to talk about this, but also not take us down. This is not about the middle school schedule right now. It's about the HMH, but this is incredibly important for you to know that this team has put a lot of work into developing a schedule that also will feed into the goal or the vision that the board has set. Okay, we want true middle schools. We want exploratory options. We want credit bearing options, and the team has done that. And so we'll probably have a more detailed description of that as we move forward.
All right, I got Director Beck, and then Passion, Jackson, and then Gordon.
Thank you. So first of all, thanks for the presentation again. And I do really appreciate the fact that we were able to see some data from the field test. I think that's really important, and at least personally, it helps me feel a little bit more comfortable about switching over. I love the fact that this is what did you call it, a one-stop shop? Like we don't have to pull things in from other programs. So I guess 2 questions. What would be sort of a typical scale score jump from the beginning of year to the middle of year before now? I mean, are these comparable? Are they better? They're not worse, I assume.
I could speak a little bit to it. So when you think about a typical scale score adjustment or a change, it does depend on the level of the student at that time. So we would say, or what HMH says or the research says, students that are more than 2 grade levels below, you would expect a larger scale score jump versus the kids that are testing above average because they don't have as much room to grow there, right? On the scale score, that is. And so there isn't a perfect number there. I think majority of the grade levels saw that if you're more than 2 grade levels below, it'd be expecting a 20 scale score jump for the entire year. Whereas when you're on the other side of the spectrum there, the higher end, we'd be saying that I think it was about a 6-point scale jump per year on a typical average year there.
Okay.
Does that kind of help? It does break it down
so
by
our
the
field
category.
testing students are basically very similar or better than what we would see before that.
The scale score that we are seeing here is just very encouraging, and we've only heard great things about that so far.
Okay. And then my other question about, I have 2 more. The assessments, you said there were 3 assessments, and are they 40 minutes each?
On average, they could take up to 40 minutes. We see students get it done in about 15 to 20 sometimes, so there's a range there.
And is this adding more assessments to assessments they already have to do?
We did not remove any assessments in this case, so at this point we find this one to be vital to our system simply because it does feed all the tier 1, 2, and 3. But this is in the same testing window time as the AMATH, which is also a very similar time constraint, excuse me.
And I'm not asking you guys to get rid of assessments that already work so we can still compare apples to apples, but I just, the more assessments we add, the less instruction time there is, although there is something to be said for learning from testing, so that's another.
And to clarify, it's 1 additional assessment each window. So 1 in the fall, 1 in the winter, and 1 on average 40. And like we talked about a little bit, with this type of a diagnostic assessment, it gives our teachers tools to act on the data, which we've been missing from, for example, that A reading assessment, which is more of a state required assessment. And we haven't had this type of a diagnostic assessment within our previous curriculum. So this is a welcomed assessment that teachers will use that data in their instruction.
Okay, cool. So my last question is one of the concerns that teachers had was about the amount of time they had to get used to the materials, particularly the ones that haven't used them already. And you mentioned, more prep time at the beginning of the year. That all depends on whether we adjust the calendar or not, which we are not voting on yet. I know it's not part of their contracts necessarily, but will teachers have access to these materials, say, over the summer if they choose to get familiar with them? And is it possible to build in at least a little bit of time at the end of the year for those teachers who haven't already seen this stuff?
So you've got some great...
Well, yes.
just to speak to a couple of the things. So I loved what you asked about are they going to get those materials ahead of time? Yes. So that was built in our commitment to make sure that they have those before they leave for the summer, and already discussions within cabinet to ensure that we can give them some opportunity in May to get some access to those pedagogy shifts so that they're really understanding. So I've got this new curriculum, but how do I engage with it, right? Because the last thing we want to do is still teach math the same way, just with a different tool or resource. We really want to help teachers understand those math best practices, which HMH, is very supportive of giving them that PD before the end of the year. And so working with us to do that.
Yeah, because the last thing I also would want to do is take away from somebody's vacation time.
Yeah. Important.
So,
Yes.
but I know personally, if I have access to it, I might spend 5 or 10 minutes looking at it a couple times over the summer, and that will ease some of my concern. But thank you.
Director Poston.
First of all, thank you for your presentation and all the time commitment that you put into this. I don't necessarily have any questions, but I do have some concerns. When I was observing, again, going back to what Director Klein-Jerome had mentioned about the technology and Waggle. So, is it a problem with the technology on our end, or is it the program itself in Waggle? And that needs to be solved because that was very disruptive. On one example, I believe it was in the second grade, the teacher brought the Chromebook over from a student that was using it, and it was in Chinese. So, what's going on? That has to be solved, and we're going to spend $4 million here. Okay, stuff like that can't happen. The other thing, and it's been commented on already, it's very heavy on reading and solving word problems. That's good. They need that, but I'm concerned about the child that's not a good reader but excels in math. So I have a concern there. And again, all the teachers commented they need more time for professional training and professional development. There was some backfilling going on as far as filling gaps in that. And I think if this is supposed to be a complete all-in-one curriculum, there should be enough materials there to fill those gaps. The other thing on the assessments, where it says it becomes immediately available, from what I observed, that was not the case. It took too long. The availability was not immediate, as what the claim is for HMH. So I would like to see that investigated also, so that if I think a couple of teachers were just doing it manually so that they could get it right away, so it was taking too long. Again, maybe that's something to do with the whole technology. And the other thing I think would be good for board members is that if we could see the materials, and Mrs. Kimmel was kind enough to give me a couple of these, so I was able to, and it helped me a lot just going through this and looking at it. So anytime that you're proposing any kind of curriculum, I think it would be good for this to be in the hands of the board members. I think it would just give us a better background on it. I think that was it. Thank you.
Jackson.
All right, so I just had two questions. So kind of piggybacking on some of the stuff that I believe Director Poston and Klein-Jerome said, in the case of, say, like what happened back in September, where we have long-term kind of catastrophic internet failure, do we have backup material to fall back on paper in case that were to occur?
That's a great question. The curriculum that we're purchasing is both online and student materials and teacher material resources, along with classroom sets of manipulatives as well. So there will be those online and in-person materials.
And
Okay,
we
and
had
then
the opportunity this year within the field test to actually respond when the technology was out and teach it in the middle of the field test. So yes, great question.
did you I guess with that answer, did you notice any significant changes when having to swap between them in terms of like how kids responded to it or difficulty or success with working with the material?
That's a great question, Jackson, that we can definitely investigate a bit to see how well teachers were able to act with just the materials instead of the online materials.
The feedback that I got from being in some of the CTTs from teachers was more just, having the materials was more their focus versus like, did I ask how the students responded? I don't know that they really noticed as much as the difference other than they could still proceed with instructing in math.
Yeah, fair enough. And then second, this is just I guess two quick things, kind of from a very personal note. So I know very personally that there is a point where sometimes you do end up actually being kind of so far above grade level that it kind of because you almost run out of stuff to work on. Is there a kind of almost tag sort of lesson for this? Or is that something that like tag itself fills in? Like what do you do for kind of the kids that are not just above, but like literally deep into the next grade level of ahead?
That's another great question. So each of the material lessons have an extension portion of their lesson along with a remediation portion based on the students and how they're interacting in the lesson. Additionally, the tier 2 product, which we historically think about being scaling down or back, also will accelerate our students as well. So we've got students that are working above grade level inside of Waggle right now, 1-2 grade levels above, because they know that they can do that and they're showing Waggle that they can do that as well.
All right, and then thank you for that. Last thing I just wanted to say, I just wanted to kind of second what Director Poston said. I was that kid he was talking about where I absolutely despised reading, especially if it was something else, but we had to do reading for it. Math was one of those things that I always was just naturally pretty good at, and I loved doing the math, but hated the reading. Nothing much more to add other than just kind of proving that person does exist. I was that person, and I know obviously this is a third-party program. Nothing really can be done directly about that, but I just didn't know if maybe they could jumpstart something about, I guess what you would do about that kid. I guess just food for thought. Thank you, guys.
Director Gordon.
Thank you for all the data that was in this presentation. It was really helpful to see the growth that happened because I was concerned about some of the things earlier in the year when you gave your initial presentation, but seeing the numbers has really kind of helped. Is this an 8-year curriculum? Did I read that somewhere? So that's kind of neat because then you'll really see probably substantial growth from the kindergartners that are starting it out, right? But to echo some of the other concerns with the current middle school scores being, kind of level and even dipping a little in some cases. Again, I was hoping to follow up on what Director Klein-Jerome said about that middle school model for the curriculum and sorting that out. And the answers that you gave are helpful, but I guess my concern is like, are those meant to start this coming year? Because I know we had talked about the middle school model going into the 24-25 year when the 6th grade goes back in, but some of that will take place. Some of the program changes are going to go ahead and start next year. Okay, so this schedule is going to go ahead and give those kids exactly what they're needing with the extra time. Okay. And then the only other question that I really had about it is like, it's obviously been a long time since I've been in a classroom, like Chromebooks weren't a thing, but how does this work? Is it more of an individualistic program since it's mostly through the Chromebook? Do the kids that are far ahead, are they aware of that? Is there a community component to it, or is it more individualized and really only the teacher knows the spectrum of what's happening, or how does that work?
And to clarify, you're talking about Waggle, the tier 2 product, or the tier 1, or both? So the tier 1 is very much core curriculum. So the group would get that core curriculum. There are extensions built in and remediations when needed, but there's a core curriculum lesson that all students would go through, with some different stations and learning situations that teachers could provide students based on their assessment or the formal check-in. Waggle, on the other hand, would be very individualized based on the growth measure assessments that are being provided to students. It would also, there is a sense of community in it as well, as the teacher can see these gems that the students are talking about. Inside Waggle, students are rewarded both by gems by getting streaks of questions right, and then also points by persevering and showing grit inside of the system and showing that they're resilient inside the system. And that can be both celebrated individually by the teacher to student or by a group as well. So it's got grasps in both of those, where it can be very group oriented, where we see a lot of our teachers are doing classroom objectives and goals to get kids to continue to be motivated and monitored, and as well as saying there's a shout out system inside of Waggle that automatically identifies individual students based on their performance inside of Waggle on the previous day or the previous week to give individual shout outs. So it's got both components in there, which is really exciting to see that.
So if I understand this, so the Waggle is sort of like what is the program that I have now with the penguin?
ST.
Is that similar? Is that how that?
Similar in the sense that they're both computer. Waggle would be more adaptive based on the student diagnostic data that they're providing to it, whereas ST Math is more of a grade level journey. And so if we were all in this classroom together, we'd all be on the same grade level journey in ST Math. Or if we're all in a classroom together right now, based on what we showed the growth measure, the Waggle would adapt to what we need.
Okay, so ST isn't considered tier 2. It's considered tier 1. Okay. Thank you.
Jackson.
Just real quick, also want to add, Director Gordon, that as someone who used ST Math, it's very educational, but I also find it's much more fun, I think. I think what they're talking about is much more closer to actual pure learning, whereas ST Math is very much I'd almost say a 50-50 mixture of learning math and just having fun. And everyone when I was in elementary school loved Gigi. Like, they wanted to meet Gigi. I think they actually did that once. They got someone coming in a Gigi costume, and they were ecstatic. So,
Director Poston.
I just wanted to follow up on what was brought up as far as updating technology and the whiteboards. Superintendent Snakecloth, would ESSER funds qualify for updating that technology and the whiteboards?
We're looking into it right now.
Okay.
But regardless, we need to move forward with it. Some of that technology is 10 years old. Some of the newest is still 5 years old. We're going to move away from bulb style technology towards a brighter, and I'm going to use some of your language, Gary, better lumens, 4K. Regardless, I think we've got it earmarked, and we need to get on it right away.
Yeah, I mean, if we're spending $4 million on curriculum, we've got to have the technology to back it up. And then you talked about there's a 3-year plan as far as training and supports and that. So what happens after 3 years? Is it just considered that we're off and running and we're okay, or will we need any further supports after that?
We have a great collaboration with Dave, who's in the back of the room. Wave, Dave, who is very responsive to any needs that we have. And so knowing that that's a plan, it's a very comprehensive PD plan, I would absolutely hope that in 3 years we're off and running and we can sustain that within our system. If not, it's a phone call away and whatever we need to get going.
So, I mean, are we looking at any additional costs down the road if we do need to have some more supports?
No.
Okay. And the other thing, were we able to get the breakdown on the costs?
Yes, I forwarded it to you.
Okay.
For the meeting.
All right. That's one thing, just to show a lump sum of this is what it's going to cost. I think we need to have more of a breakdown on materials, supports, anything that's involved in there. I'm sure they gave you a complete breakdown of what that is. I think that would be helpful just to see, what's all involved. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
To clarify, you want more of an itemized quote. That's what you're asking for. Director Beck?
Two last questions. So, and this kind of goes along with what Jackson asked about. One of the things I'm always concerned about is the amount of time kids are spending on their Chromebooks. And we know that handwriting things is linked with learning them. So even though Waggle, for example, is an online product, how much time are kids spending using a workbook or, pencil and paper math, which would also support those students who maybe don't read very well, but can do addition and subtraction and algebra?
Students be using workbooks to support the entire Tier 1 process. Teachers do have the ability to assign materials online as well to support Tier 1, but majority are still using the workbooks, and they agree that have students writing and working inside the workbook is very beneficial for that student learner. So that's always supportive inside of the Tier 1 process.
Okay, so the Waggle is like the additional
Tier 2.
That's right,
work.
Tier 2 product. Yep.
And also know, the teachers are encouraging and really modeling for students that even when they're in Waggle, they've got the whiteboard, the paper right there, that they're showing the work and doing the work. Same when we're taking assessments, there's that option to take that assessment online, where again, there's benefits to that, right? If we take it online, it's good practice. As we do that with ISASP and other things, that we can get that data back a lot quicker as well. But they've also been told we want to show that work and do that and then input it, so that we're doing both.
Okay. My last question, and I may have asked this before, but how culturally sensitive and diverse is this curriculum? Since we're talking about word problems and stories.
So that was a piece on the instructional rubric that we talked about. That was a key component that we looked for. And like I said, they all scored meeting that proficiency in each of the areas. So very high.
I have a few questions. First, thank you very much for the presentation. One of my questions, all of the charts and bar graphs and everything, I'm assuming you pulled that right off of this program. So how long does it take to put that stuff together? I'm trying to figure, like, when you give us data dives on, math scores and things like that, because this is a lot better than what we've had. So what's like the turn? Does it automatically do it for you, or do you got to pick what you're looking for? Or?
So most of the data charts that you saw were provided by HMH. There was about a 2-week turnaround, and that's part of this purchase as well. We'll have access to all these charts at all times throughout the entirety of the production. I pull some of the data myself and create some of these charts too. So depending on the data that we need, I'm able to do that in a rather quick turnaround as well if something comes up to support these conversations and these data discussions.
Also good to know that the buildings got those data sets too. So while we presented you district data, all of those slides our buildings got for their individual building as well. And we went out and got to celebrate that data with each of those field test buildings last week, which was great to get to share all those data sets with them.
Okay. It seems a lot more streamlined than what we've done before, especially if you can break down to the building, to the classroom, and most importantly to the student, because then you know right where you need to do that. I love the fact that it has the supports built in and stuff. And then one of my other questions, and you had touched on it, there's like recognitions built in the program. What does that look like? Like, I know I have a kindergartner and I have a fourth grader, both at Fillmore, and I got high schoolers too. But I know, like, my kindergartner gets so excited to bring home that little certificate that he's this level or whatever. It's a huge thing as soon as you pick him up. Wants to tell you about it. Well, then my fourth grader feels a little challenged. She's like, well, I'm at this level and stuff. So it gets him excited and engaged. So is that kind of what this will still look like, doing that stuff?
Yeah, so Waggle is built, it's got that built-in shout-out system. And so depending on how the teacher is using it in the classroom, we see some phenomenal things that are class-wide as well, along with the individual shout-out and praise. So that's always going to be inside of Waggle. That's some of the feedback we're giving to them, is that we really appreciate the student-centered celebration, simply because that is so important to many of our students. There's some other intrinsic motivational things inside of Waggle. So earning time with an avatar, or things that are going to really get kids really excited about moving along inside the system. That's really exciting too. So the grade levels are a little different based inside the Waggle. And so there's a little bit different between your kindergartner there and your fourth grader based on the program itself, with some of the intrinsic rewards in there. But there's a great wealth of those certificates or those PDFs that teachers can create and use for students to celebrate them, along with showing that on the whiteboard or the chalkboard or whatever it's going to be in the future, to celebrate all of our students as well.
Okay.
Chalkboard.
Now they post, I'm trying to remember the app, but Seesaw. We get updates on Seesaw regularly, so that's kind of cool, and we get to see that stuff on there too. Not gonna lie, it's probably some of my favorite text messages to look at out of the hundreds I get. On the professional development piece, so it's a 3-year thing, so you start doing that stuff next year, so the next year we have to hire more teachers, aware of what's built in to pick those teachers up to catch up to where everyone else is at. Because I would assume, like in my industry, things change all the time. We always have constant upgrades and things like that, and we do classes on the different things coming out and stuff like that. So I would assume there would be something on there, but if you're gonna have a whole group starting out this year and then we hire some more in a future year, they're gonna need to be brought up to that. So is there things built into this for that too?
I got it. You got it?
Go.
You got it? Okay. The 3-year PD plan that's articulated here is really site-based. So whatever the building needs or desires, they can get out of their initial trainer, the trainer that's dedicated towards them. Another piece of the PD that we didn't talk about much today is that there's always on-demand training inside the system as well. So the other side of things, that's the contracted with HMH. We'll also have our infrastructure here in DCSD for our TLCS team, our teacher leaders, the curriculum supports that can always help onboard anybody who's new as well, to utilize those on-demand resources as well to bring up those new teachers along every single year. So with a mix of all the pieces together, I feel very confident about onboarding new teachers and continuing to support teachers throughout the 3 years with HMH and then beyond without HMH.
Okay, perfect. And then lastly, I want to commend you all for your presentation, for the fact that there were issues, you addressed them, and here are the things that you're going to put in place to take care of those concerns. And I think that was still some of the questions some of the board members had asked, but you all had addressed that. So I greatly appreciate that, because it's not always sunshine and rainbows, right? There's always things that need to be worked out. So it's good that that's acknowledged and there's things, and we can move forward from there.
I appreciate that. And I think that was so beneficial for us with getting to do a field test. And I think I've enjoyed getting to work with Mike and give you some of those board memo updates, just to talk about that process. Like TJ mentioned, we haven't had one before, and this was just a great opportunity to apply that process to our first adoption. And just knowing that it's not going to be perfect. We're going to have road bumps and hiccups along the way, like we talked about, but just working with those teachers to make sure we know it's the right product. That's not ever the question. It's how do we make it work best in Davenport, and what do our teachers need to do that? And so the field test allowed us to do that. And as we have other adoptions that are coming up here, it's exciting to have a process to do exactly what you're talking about.
Perfect, thank you. I appreciate the fact too that they can upgrade their avatars for free and it doesn't cost me anything. So I greatly appreciate that, because my kids are all about that. Is there any other discussion on this? This is the longest discussion item we've ever had on an item requiring action. So the motion's been made by Director Beck, seconded by Director Klein Jerome. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. We'll do a roll call vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Now now you all get to go home.
Yeah, we need a break.
Apparently, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and we'll be right back.
Okay, so
All right, we are back. May I have a motion on subject 11.03, purchase walk-in freezer for bakery at Davenport Learning Center?
Mr. President,
Director Beck.
I move the board approve the purchase of a walk-in freezer by Food and Nutrition Services for the bakery at Davenport Learning Center in the amount of $72,000 from Crawford Company.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Hayes. Is there any discussion? All right, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. May I have a motion on subject 11.04, annual purchase of Chromebooks?
Mr. President,
Director Beck.
I move the board approve the purchase of 3,500 Chromebooks, licenses, and services from CDWG at a cost of $1,028,195.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Oh, I couldn't tell if you were twitching your fingers or not. All right. Director Gordon.
I just wanted to know, is the district prepared to offer any kind of daycare for the kids in the district with parents and guardians who work outside of the home if we're going to add full days off of school instead of hour outs on Wednesdays? I am so sorry. I swear to God you said. Okay, in that case, I'm ready for the vote. Sorry. I missed that. Did we skip?
She was just stretching her fingers.
Oh, we're on action. Sorry, I was reading. How dare I?
All right. Just to reiterate, we are voting on subject 11.04, annual purchase of Chromebooks. It was moved by Director Beck, seconded by Director Hayes. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. May I have a motion on subject 11.05, board policies for board approval?
Mr. President,
Director Klein Jerome.
I move that we approve the changes to the following policies: 401.07, 401.16, 401.18, 401.19, 402.03, 402.07, 402.12, 402.14, and 402.18.
Is there a second? All right. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Now we are moving on to discussion items. The first subject for discussion is Buffalo School sign replacement. Turn it over to the superintendent.
Okay, so Buffalo's got a sign that's on the side of their building that's pretty old, and it doesn't fully work, so it's not really being utilized. It was original to the building. You can't get parts for it anymore, so we would like to update that and move the location to a much easier spot to read and see from the public. The PTA is inclined to put a little money towards it, and around $14,000. So the rest, the $20,000, will be covered by the district out of PEBBLE funds. When looking at the list, there's 11 remaining buildings that do not have signs out front like this one. So we are beginning the process to go through those buildings and where they're at. I got 2 other quotes and coming for 2 other buildings. They just starting arriving this morning. So I think it's needed in a number of our buildings, but we got to start somewhere. And this one's already on the buildings. So let's get the ones we have working and then continue moving forward. Any questions?
Yeah, I'd like to know, is this typically the way that we have purchased these signs before? Because I think I remember being in a building where it was 100% funded by the PTA. So now we're splitting it. So is this something new or?
Looking back at the history, I have a document that kind of shows how they were all paid for in the past, and it's really split up. I mean, going back to, probably 5 years or so, there's been some that have been covered completely by the PTA and some that were covered completely by the district. So in some cases, I think there's a more, the PTA is more involved than other buildings. So the school district that's kicking a little more funds than those buildings that are not as involved. So it's something they want at Buffalo. The PTA does, and the families do there. So
I guess my concern is down the road that we're not ever saying to a PTA, oh, you got to fund the whole thing, because if we're not requiring Buffalo to pay for the whole thing, I don't want to see any other building from here on out having to pay for the whole thing.
okay, understandable.
Director Beck.
I guess along those lines, maybe we should develop a policy on how to approach these in the future, just so that, because we know signs come in different sizes and different quality and things like that. And so I can see a sign, we're just going to replace the one that you stick the letters on, but the PTA says, no, we want one that lights up, and they add in the difference or something like that. But I understand that not all schools have a PTA that's active enough to throw in the money. So I think maybe in the future, developing a policy on sort of how, not necessarily an official board policy, but a procedure
On our side.
on how you guys do that, might be useful to avoid the sort of piecemeal way things are going, and to make sure that no school is sort of left behind just because they don't have an active PTA at the moment.
Yeah. And there can be some variance in costs based on the location away from the building. And if you have to go across the parking lot, there's a lot to it. So you can see them vary from $10,000 to $15,000 up to $30,000, $40,000. So, yep.
Oh, I had a follow-up question. Sorry. Do we have the capacity to fix light bulbs and software problems that go along with this? Because there's nothing that people hate more than a sign where this little spot doesn't light up anymore, or
We should. And like this, in this case, there's stuff that can't be updated on this sign in particular. So that's kind of why that one got pushed to the forefront, or was brought up to us that, hey, this is not working and we can't get parts for it anymore.
Okay.
But yeah, there are probably some other buildings I'm not even aware of, or some areas that I'm not aware of that maybe need an update or something fixed.
Okay. And then what are you guys going to do with the spot where the old one is?
I believe it's just brick behind it, so I think it'll just get taken down. We'll fill any holes that are in the wall, and it'll be left.
Director Poston.
I think in the past, for playground equipment, sometimes the PTA would purchase the equipment, and then the school district took care of the installation cost. That might be another thing you can look at down the road too, that if you've got a real active PTA. And I know some businesses have contributed to purchase of signs in the past too.
Okay.
Any other discussion on any other information anyone needs before this comes to us for a vote? My only thing is, it's a sign for our buildings. We should cover the cost. It shouldn't be on the PTO or PTA to do that. There's other things that they need to do in that building, and anyone who is a parent of kids, there's so many fundraisers and things that we're already asking for, and then to have them do one more, I think is a little unfair on our part. That's something we should own. So
okay,
that's the only thing I was going to say. And then if you can, just for information purposes, what's the life cycle before they're outdated? 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, just so we know that when we go to do it.
Okay.
And then if we can get something on a routine to where we know that these ones are coming up in the future, so we can get them done ahead of time.
Yep. That's where we started the document, just to kind of get a background of where we're at, where we've been. And it really is all over the board, so I can see why there are some questions about how we go about it. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Seeing no other discussion on that one, we'll move on to subject 12.02, the 2023-2024 academic calendar. Director Gordon.
So I learned my lesson not to scroll ahead on the agenda if I'm not fully paying attention to every word. Okay. Is the district prepared to offer any kind of daycare for the hundreds or thousands of kids in the district with parents and guardians who work outside of the home for those Mondays off?
So I'll write that question down and make sure we get it answered today or some at the end. But I think Mr. Flynn was going to present the calendars first. That's okay.
My bad.
That's all right.
Before we have any discussion, Mr. Flynn, please present the calendars to us.
Thank you, President Gosa. The calendar that is being presented today came about as a result of some committee work to start with, some vetting amongst all of the different bargaining groups. But really, as we started to develop the calendar, we knew what a traditional calendar looked like. We also knew that other districts around us and other UEN districts were going to different models. So there are 2 districts in the surrounding area that have half days of PD in place of a Wednesday early out. There are districts UEN-wise, Des Moines, Cedar Falls, Cedar Rapids, Waterloo, that have gone to a full day release in lieu of this. We wanted to look at every option that we could to try and make the best decision in terms of a calendar, presenting a calendar that would meet our needs, meet the needs of our students, and meet the needs of our teachers. We developed these different options with a few different parameters in place. We wanted to make sure that we built hours into the calendar just to safeguard against bad weather or any other events that might occur. We wanted to minimize, based on the feedback that we had received from some teachers, the need to cover when we had leadership academies or things of that nature. So as we developed the half day and the full day PD sessions, we kept in mind that we could potentially schedule the things that we're pulling teachers out for and building administrators out for into a full day much more easily than we could a Wednesday early out. And we also developed the 2 non-traditional options initially with the thought that there's always been some concern that the Wednesday early outs don't provide enough time for meaningful PD on a regular basis. By the time people get to a PD session, it's often at the end of a day of teaching. By the time people get there from duties and whatnot, it just limits the amount of time. So we tried to capitalize on the opportunity to look at something new. So a calendar was put together. It was vetted. A survey was sent to our staff and to our parents and guardians. We had 1,218 responses to that survey. And they provided some excellent feedback and excellent questions as well. So I just wanted to provide that quick overview so that there was kind of a framework for why we look beyond the traditional schedule as we started to develop these. And I would ask Jamie, am I missing anything? Thank you.
Sure. Now we will have discussion. Director Beck.
I apologize if I missed it, Mr. Flynn, but did you tell us how many people, because we had sort of 2 options to vote on for the calendars, how many people chose each one, or were you guys just looking for feedback on them?
We were looking for feedback because we knew there were holes, but we did want to gauge where the community was. 68% of the respondents responded in favor of the full day, 32% in favor of the traditional schedule.
And were they mostly staff or were they families? And
Unfortunately, we built this so that it would be,
anyone?
We didn't build that in. So
Okay.
all responses went into one category.
Okay. So my 2 questions. Is it possible to move the full days closer to breaks? So for example, there's a full day PD on September 11th, but September 4th is Labor Day. And if you made the full day PD on the 5th, then that is a time when families are already used to traveling, right? And I realize this may not be possible, but I'm just trying to think of ways to make it a little bit easier for, I understand January 2nd, that's perfect. It's just an extra day of winter break. And October 9th, I think, is often right around Indigenous Peoples Day anyway. But, making a couple of these closer to another break already, just to accommodate people who might have trouble finding childcare, would be useful. The half-day option would probably allow for stepping stones, but it looks like that might not be feasible for all of the reasons you mentioned, that the 1 hour early out isn't really feasible. So
the half day option, we receive feedback from different groups that it makes it very challenging for lunches and meals and times like that. So for principals and food service, it would become very challenging.
Director Klein-Jerome?
I don't think stepping stones is provided when they have 2 hour out, so I'm sure a half a day they would not be there. So just my experience with it. And in-service days, is any of that time going to be for teachers, or is it all district time? Give me the right answer.
Yeah. Well, the schedule itself has not been determined because we wanted to make sure that we knew what we were going with before we went there. I would have you look though at the calendar. The red dates are 2 hour early out dates, and that is all teacher time on those days. We made sure with this calendar, one of the things that came up with the DEA was that teachers are assured 1 hour of teacher time, duty-free teacher time each month. So those 9 hours 10 hours actually, are being built into the calendar. We wanted to make sure that all of our teachers knew they were going to be assured of that time.
So you don't really know what the in-service days are going to look like yet.
We have ideas of what they might look like. And we also know that one of the big concerns that came about from the feedback, even when we have our in-service days now, it's usually half-day district, half-day teacher, half-day building, half-day teacher. There's a break and there are transitions within that time. We still have a lot of things we need to get covered on those dates, but we know that we have to schedule those with the mindset of the learner and the learner's capacity for a day's worth of work in that regard. And I know, Director Klein-Jerome, you know what I'm saying with that piece.
That's right. There is a lot of in-service days on there. That's why I don't want to sit in a meeting all day long if I were the teacher.
Director Gordon?
Forgive me if I'm not remembering this correctly, but haven't quarter ends typically fallen alongside of 2 hour early outs? Or is that, because I remember being surprised at this last one or this upcoming one. I can't remember what it is. My kids are like, why aren't we getting out early? Going along with what Director Beck had said, if we could kind of combine some of that, then that gives the teachers that time to finish up their grading for the quarter as well, which I know is always something that they're trying to squeeze in at the end of the day. So that was just another thought.
Any other discussion? What's up?
Which I would like to answer. Director Gordon.
Sure, go ahead.
From the beginning. So on these days, what we've typically done is provided a list of resources for families to access. We will not be able to provide all-day daycare to families such as Stepping Stones because the people that run Stepping Stones are our staff. And so it would be very difficult. But there are many organizations out there that step up for those things, and we can easily put a list together that families can access and utilize. Good suggestion.
Did you have anything else, Director Gordon? Director Beck?
I know in the past, the the YMCA of the area has done school day out programming on a one day by day basis. And I don't think it's come back since the pandemic, but I would encourage us to talk with the Y about setting up that programming for the days that we have full PD, because that really is a concern, especially if you can't move the dates closer to breaks. Then it would make sense to at least have something available for families that need that childcare. I know I would have been one, and I will be one again in a couple years. So,
Any other discussion? Director Gordon.
I just wanted to have this on the record that Director Klein Jerome just told me if I had scrolled down and read it, that there are 2 hour early outs on the quarterly. And the color coding is what I was looking at. And, Monday brain, one thing at a time. So I just wanted to clarify that for anyone listening.
Any other discussion? Any other discussion or information you need? I'm assuming this is coming on the 27th. Would that be? Yeah. For a vote. I do want to reiterate this because this was one of the things we learned at our ISB 2-day training. We don't want to commingle daycare with what we provide, because we don't want the legislators thinking that that's what we do with our money instead of educating kids. That was something they hammered home very much so on us on that. So we can show people the way, but they have to access it. All right, seeing none, we will move on to subject 12.03, COVID incentive for the 2023-24 school year. Who's taking that one?
That would be me.
Ms. Winesboro, you're up.
Thank you. So this is always an exciting topic when you can talk about giving your employees more money. If we scroll down to the next slide, COVID incentive recipients, we have that it would be all current employees in paid status. And then I also list out the Department of Education guidance, so you all know that it's legal and we're following the rules under ESSER when we're proposing something like this. If you scroll down to the next one, Brenda, what we are proposing is a two-phased approach, but it would be a total of $3,000 for each employee within the district. You can see I've got the number of staff in anticipation also filling vacancies. So we're really wanting to attract and retain staff. We're understaffed this year. And then we also want to retain all the awesome staff members that we have that have been working hard, covering for each other, just navigating still after the world of COVID. So the first round would be, let me click on it would be $3.516 million. And then if you scroll down, that would be the same for phase 2. And if you scroll down one more, then the total estimated cost would be a little over $7 million. The one last slide that we have on there are some additional parameters, some lessons learned from the last incentive that we did. Just like the last time, this incentive would exclude non-teacher coaches, substitutes, and temp at wills, and employees that are on unpaid extended leaves of absences, which is not family medical leave or medical related. This time, the incentive will not be grossed up. It would be less any applicable taxes. And then employees who are receiving the incentive would be expect to work the entire school year with the district. And in order this time to receive the incentive, they would need to sign off that they would authorize payroll to deduct the incentive if they did not fulfill the requirements of the incentive. And then any new hires, their incentives would be prorated based on their hire date. And then questions.
Director Beck.
I have no problems with giving employees some extra money for well-deserved service. What were the dates on the phase 1 and phase 2? Is it like at the beginning of the year, or in the middle of the year and at the end of the year next year?
So it would be probably for teachers, it would be the November check because of everything that Debbie and payroll has to do in preparation for the first check in October. So this year, some of the payments became challenging. So we would do the first payment in November for teachers, and then December would be for other staff because everyone's, not everyone, but there's different pay schedules. And then we would do it again towards the end of the school year, springtime, to try and retain as many, especially of the non-contractual staff members.
Any other? Director Gordon?
I see that this excludes substitutes. Is there anything that we can do for those that are regular, consistently coming back year after year substitutes? Maybe not a COVID incentive, but something. Can we give them any kind of financial
That's
incentive?
something that would be something I'd have to look into further. And we've got an ESSER committee, and we can look at the rules and regulations on non-staff. Unfortunately, they're not considered your traditional employee, but something I can look into.
Hold on. I have a follow-up to that.
Mhm.
If we did that and that person's not contractually obligated to us for the whole year, but we have that in there that they will be payroll deducted if they do not, then how would we go about
We would
that? Because then essentially you're opening the door for if someone left that we couldn't recoup that.
Yeah, so we would have to do a completely different structure for that group and put some different requirements on the number of days that they subbed in the district. It would be challenging and really expensive to offer to anyone that has signed up or done a day of subbing. So I think Director Gordon, it'd probably be more of the long-term subs that kind of commit to some of the longer-term assignments, but it's something I would need to look into on the parameters.
Director Poston?
So on the new hires, obviously you don't know how many new hires you're going to have. So how are we going to fit that into our budget? I assume if they start at the beginning of the year, they'll get the 2 payments of $1,500, correct?
Correct. And then we would prorate it. And I did go back to, as an estimate, what our current vacancies are to include those in the numbers that I provided. So the numbers I provided wasn't just our straight employees right now. It baked in some of the vacancies that we currently have to try and have a more accurate reflection of the expense.
So that's in the $7 million figure?
Yes.
Any other discussion on this? Thank you very much for putting this out to us. I think it's a good thing to offer our employees a bump every now and again when we can. On the substitute thing, I guess I would like to see like a tiered thing. If you do X number of days, you would get this much, but then they're not getting it at the same time everybody else is because they would have to wait till they hit those benchmarks. But
yeah, they'd be incentivized, incentivized for hitting thresholds for next year.
And then if they sub in our district, they just have to sub for us more days.
Yes.
That's it. Does anyone have any other discussion on this? This will be coming to us on the 27th as well. Anyone need any other information for this part of it? All right, thank you. Thanks, Jamie. Next discussion subject is 12.04 policies for board's first review.
The only thing is, and I mentioned this earlier, 413.01 says classified employees resignation, but the wording inside is all the retirement language. So this one will be pulled and we'll just bring it back once we've corrected that. Anybody have any questions about the rest of them? Director Hayes?
On 409.01, in the second line, the word with or make was removed, and that needs to be added back to make changes.
So, but it's the responsibility of the superintendent to recommend changes to the board as needed. So yes, they took out make a, but to recommend.
Okay.
You disagree with that wording? Sometimes it's hard to figure out when you're crossing out and changing colors.
Okay, just to recommend changes. Okay.
Director Beck?
First of all, I wanted to thank Jamie W. for going through all these licensed and classified employee policies. That was a lot of stuff. I just had a question about 505.08, the parent and family engagement district-wide policy. The vast majority of this is code language related to Title I. Is this all information that we need in a policy, or okay? And it's only Title I programming that this applies to. Is that correct?
Yes, this is a requirement of Title I.
Okay. Can we add that into the name somehow? Because though we do these types of things with all of our families, or we try to, because everything in here relates to Title I, would we want to put that in the name of the policy just to clarify it a little bit and separate it from sort of general family engagement? Does that make sense?
There are also ESSA requirements in there as well, so I would assume
Okay.
that's why they say that, because there's different parent-family engagement requirements through those regulations as well.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. This will be coming back again and again.
All right, we will move on. Administrative reports.
None at this time.
Board request.
Oh.
We have one board request from Director Klein Jerome, data request 2/13/2023. Item requested is an agenda item. Description of request: discuss a policy to give employees health insurance through the month of August who give notice by January 15th of their intent to retire at the end of the school year. Why are you making this request? With the staffing issues many districts are experiencing, this would give the district more time to recruit. It would also give employees 2 additional months of health insurance. When would you like this?
Oh, as soon as possible.
As soon as possible. Is there a second? Seconded by Director Gordon. Any other board requests? All right. Board reflection. We'll start with Director Beck.
Well, I really appreciate the in-depth dive into the math adoption. We've gotten that a couple times, and the fact that we've seen data from a pilot, a test run of the materials is, I think, a really good sign. Rather than just sort of adopting materials and implementing them across the district, we're taking a measured and more stepwise approach, and I think that's really good. And then the other thing is the fact that we get to give our employees some extra money as a COVID incentive.
Thank you, Director Poston.
Yeah, I also think that the discussion that we had on the math curriculum was really good. And also a big thank you to the teachers that did the field testing. It was a lot of extra work on their part, but appreciate their time and dedication. And then the other thing would be the brownie from Brenda.
Write that one in big bold letters. Director Hayes.
That brownie was a plus, Brenda. From no shopping to brownies. Whoa. Hey, I really like the way the presentations came just prior to the action items, that we had the extra opportunity to hear more about it prior to that vote. I also liked the math presentation to see where it's going. And, you know, with that, on a personal level, I watch my grandson kind of work with it. So it's something that's really working. And I don't know if the majority of our students are like him, but they get really excited about it, to talk about it. So those were nice things to have some background behind it, and then also see the students.
Thank you. Director Gordon.
I also really enjoyed the math presentation. I was glad to see the data from the beginning of the year to the middle of the year. And I think it would be neat to witness the one of the professional development days for that. So if that's something that we could possibly be invited to view or hang out during part of the day or whatever when they're learning that, I would enjoy that.
Thank you, Director Klein-Jerome.
I appreciated in the math presentation that they answered our questions or addressed our questions that we had asked before. And they also had some, here's what teachers' concerns are and how they were addressing that. So it wasn't just, okay, we heard you, but we moved on, so that they actually addressed that. Always good to give out incentives to keep people in the district.
Thank you. Superintendent Schneckloff.
It's re-energizing to see us get back on the proactive instead of being reactive, and the tools that our staff members have in their hands to teach our students, there's nothing more important, or it's a very important component to teaching. And so to see what happens when you give our staff members high quality tools, and I'm excited because it's just the first step.
Thank you. First, I want to say thank you to Tim Longoria for the meeting. Went very well, no interruptions, so thank you, Tim. Always got to give a shout out to the IT guys. I will ditto what everyone else has said. And like Director Klein-Jerome said, it was great having that presentation, and then here are some of the issues we had with it. Here is what we're doing to correct those issues and move forward. From just my time on the board, these presentations have gotten so much better and so much more engaging, and we're seeing this stuff. So it's always nice to see that, you know, we're making the right steps forward and doing the things. And personally, as a parent, it's nice to see that kind of stuff that's going to engage my kids, because they're a little more into the tablet and things like that, that's where they're at and what engages them and gets them there. And when we're able to reach those kiddos and do that, that's where we really make the difference. And at the end of the day, that's what we all do it for, is for the kids and the students. So with that, Director Potts isn't here tonight, but I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it, meeting adjourned.